Schaefer shown the door at Syracuse. Beamer says goodbye. Will his replacement arrive via Graceland? And for Clemson and North Carolina, they hope to survive traditional rivalry games this weekend to keep playoff hopes alive. This is ACC Breakdown. We come your way every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And this a very special edition because this is, hey, the last game of the regular season. And for guys like Dan Rubin, this is their season, period. Ended in November. That's it. So we've got Brittany Taylor Newman from football.com and the aforementioned Dan Rubin from BC Interruption. I said BC, so you know what his plight's been this season. And we've got Justin Cates from Inside the ACC. So before we continue, everyone, happy early Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Yes. And Brittany delaying her shopping for us here. So what's on the menu? What do you have to make tonight, Brittany?
I've got to whip up a vat of mashed potatoes and a pecan pie.
Okay. So before you hit the kitchen, lay down some football knowledge for us here first. So Justin, actually, we'll start with you, and thanks for making your debut here late in the season. So you're going to have to make a big splash because the games are big. Frank Beamer off to retirement. You're going to play some golf, spend some time with some family, and obviously he's made his mark. In college football, not necessarily in the last few years, but a great stay at Virginia Tech. So just your thoughts about Frank Beamer going off into the sunset and possibly a replacement there in Blacksburg.
You know, it's funny, in full disclosure, I am a Hokie. We've known this is coming for years, and no matter how much you think about it, it was still kind of emotional. It was incredibly emotional, actually, and I wasn't even in the stadium. Frank obviously is a good guy. You're probably all sick of hearing about how good a guy he is, but he is. And he's won a lot of football games, created an extraordinary program in Blacksburg, and you know he's left it in a great spot for whoever comes in, but that's a tough act to follow for anybody.
Yeah, so who are we hearing about the possible replacement?
You know, it's mostly the names that you hear for most of the jobs that are open right now, and the one that's most mentioned recently has been Justin Fuente from Memphis, and kind of a Frank Beamer light, if you will. He's a humble guy who actually has a Murray State connection. He played there. Frank coached there, and there are a lot of similarities. He recruits a lot of guys that don't have big offer lists from high-profile programs, and that's what Frank Beamer's been doing for a number of years and making the most out of 2- and 3-star recruits. So that might not excite a lot of Hokie fans, but he can really coach offense. He has a lot of good things going for him. He's built the program out of nothing at Memphis, really. And I think if Tech could land him, it would be a really, really good pull for athletic director Whit Babcock.
Virginia Tech at 5-6, looking to defeat Virginia for, like, I think the 87th consecutive year and move on to postseason play. So we'll talk a little bit about the Hokies and the Cavaliers. In just a few minutes. The tears flowing as well about the departure of Scott Schaefer at Syracuse. Dan?
Yeah, podiums everywhere. Podiums everywhere are rejoicing and celebrating that Scott Schaefer's gone. If nothing else, because that's probably the only notable thing he did in 3 years. Was shatter a podium after they lost. I think it was to Duke last year. Outside of that, he's a huge disappointment for no other word. It's not even lack of a better term. That is the term. You saw what he did the first year and took them, I think it was 3rd or 4th place in the Atlantic Division, and then fell off, and that's it for him. But he still gets to coach on Saturday, which can only mean one thing, that it's the annual pillow fight game with Syracuse and Boston College, especially this year.
Yes, an even more of a soft matchup with both teams this year, with Boston College and Syracuse. So the Frank Beamer send-off is pretty rare, where a coach can have that kind of an illustrious career and his legacy be talked about. And then you've got the Scott Schaefer that's more run-of-the-mill. I took over a program, wasn't able to improve the situation, and I'm gone after 2.5 or 3 years. Then we've got the likes of Jimbo Fisher, who's coaching at the elite level, is at one of the marquee programs across the country, but still there are rumors that he may not necessarily stick around Tallahassee, Brittany.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this week, obviously, everybody's sort of waiting with bated breath to find out what the fate of Les Miles will be at LSU. The rumors at this point are so strong that he and LSU are going to be parting ways that it's starting to get hard to believe that it's not actually going to happen. And of course, LSU is behind the scenes trying to secure conversations with different coaches. You obviously wouldn't want to let somebody like Les Miles go without having at least a backup plan, and Jimbo Fisher's name is part of that conversation as far as the media is concerned, at least. He did address that a little bit tonight on his call-in show. Most of it's just coach speak, saying, I love this place. It's a great place. It's been very good to me. Hopefully I'll end up being very good to it. Doesn't mean a whole lot, doesn't say a whole lot. But for me personally, I think that most of what's going to drive Jimbo's decision, if he is indeed being offered the head coaching position at LSU, is going to be personal reasons. And that's always kind of a tricky thing as a writer, at least for me, to address. I hate to delve too much into coaches' private lives because they get so little privacy as there is. But Jimbo's had some issues in his personal life this year, with the Tallahassee Democrat reporting earlier in the year that he and his wife had separated and hired attorneys. Obviously, his son Ethan has been diagnosed with Fanconi anemia, and the life expectancy for someone with that disease, it's incurable, is a little bit shorter. So, he has family considerations that I think are going to drive his decision much more so than money or the chance to be able to win at a school in the SEC. I think he's going to be looking at what he can do to still be close to his kids if, things are not working out in his personal life. I think that's going to be his primary consideration, as it would for any parent who's in that situation. So usually when we're talking about these kinds of decisions, we're really chatting about numbers and programs and the chance to coach an elite storied program, which certainly Florida State is too. But I personally think that those factors are going to end up driving his decision much more so than money or wins or big names.
Yeah, so while there will be much debate as to whether that's the right move or not, I think you definitely bring some things into play there, Brittany, that certainly can't be evaluated by anyone outside of Jimbo Fisher's family and his own personal decision there. All right, everyone, it's every Tuesday that we wait with bated breath for the college football rankings to be released, and this week, not a whole lot of shakeup, not while around the country there's much debate over who should be where. In the ACC, it's pretty much standard operating procedure as it's been since the week one announcement of Clemson as the #1 team in the country. Florida State, after that second loss, has kind of bowed out of college football playoff competition. You got North Carolina trying to gain some respect. So, Justin, I'll ask you your thoughts about the ACC rankings in the college football standings, and maybe other thoughts about what elsewhere in the country could affect ACC play and North Carolina in particular.
Well, the Tar Heels are a great football team. They really are. Obviously, they're 10-1, but that South Carolina loss is just an enormous albatross. I mean, that was just such a bad loss, and even though it happened at the beginning of the season, it's still very much on the minds of the committee. And I believe they're 14th this week, and I just don't see any way possible that they can sneak into the picture unless every team in front of them has a problem, and I don't know, maybe bad turkey. But I really doubt that that's going to be in the cards. But they're still playing for a lot, obviously. If they can get it going against Clemson and win the ACC title, that's a heck of an accomplishment for Larry Fedora, and that's another name that's been bandied about for a number of college football openings for head coaches, and we'll see what happens there. I think he's got a good thing going. But as far as Clemson goes, I think they're clearly the best team in the country. I don't question that at all. And there are a number of really interesting matchups that could happen there if they do in fact take care of business against South Carolina, which I kind of assume they will, and then against North Carolina in that title game.
Dan, did you catch that? You got to watch out for the bad turkey. I hope you were listening.
There's no such thing as bad turkey at Thanksgiving, especially in New England. I mean, the only bad turkeys are the ones with the turkey fryers when people don't set the fryer up too close to the house. Put it a little too close, not far enough away. Then that's a bad turkey. That's the only bad turkey I know.
All right. Turkey frying tips with Dan. Love it. All right, Dan, we've got these college football rankings where we've got Florida State at 13, North Carolina at 14, of course, Clemson all the way at the top. Your thoughts about the situation, and does Clemson still get in with a loss?
I think they do, but I think it determines it has to be kind of where that loss happens. I think if they win the ACC and they lose this week, it depends how the game goes. If it's one of those things where they play a really well-played game against South Carolina, they can maybe get in. Feel like the problem with the that later on in the year, you always seem to lose that game and there's no ground to make it up. So that's probably part of the problem for Clemson, is if they lose at this stage, they can I think they can get in as long as they win the ACC. But it's going to be tough, especially with the way that the rankings play out and the way that kind of as you see teams earlier in the year lose, they tend to have more ground to make up, or more ground to allow them to make up for that loss. They're going to need some help. They're going to need Oklahoma to lose. They're going to need Notre Dame to lose again in order for a one-loss Clemson to get in. So it's paramount that they go undefeated. I still think they can get in, but they'll need some help.
Dan, Justin called North Carolina a great football team. I wanted to be kind to our guest in his first appearance. I really don't think North Carolina is a great football team. But I don't know. They haven't played anyone. They can't help it that the division's down, that Pitt's probably the second best team in the division, at least record-wise. They didn't play the big boys in the other division. It's going to be until the ACC championship game before we know if North Carolina is truly, I tend to not use the term great, but an elite team on this college football landscape right now. Your thoughts about the Tar Heels?
I think the Tar Heels, I think they're a good team. I think they're good enough to win the ACC, because when you're undefeated in your division, they're going to go to the ACC championship game. They're going to play Clemson in the ACC championship game. One game, winner take all, anything's possible. And with an offense that can really light up the lamp, put up 50 points on Wake, put up 66 on Duke, we're not talking about beating really solid programs or great teams at that point, but you've done enough to prove that you're pretty good. And if you're pretty good in a one-game winner-take-all, that's all you need in order to win it all. If it was a best of 7, maybe you pick Clemson unquestionably to win it, but this is only a one game. Like I know I keep repeating myself. It's only one game. North Carolina is good enough to win this league if they're able to get into that game.
Well, Dan, we excuse you repeating yourself. We know that you've been itching to get back on the show, so it's all good. Brittany, was there anything that jumped out to you when you saw the rankings initially?
Well, I think just that for the second week in a row, UNC is ranked behind a 2-loss Florida State team with only 1 loss on their schedule. I don't think that they're going to get any kind of a bump in the rankings from winning against NC State this weekend. So that was something I wrote about today on football.com, was if you're a Tar Heels fan and you want an ACC team in the playoff, you need to be cheering for Clemson to win out, because I don't think without a Notre Dame loss and Big 12 upheaval that they would make it into the Final Four. So that's kind of my thought. I tend to agree with the guys for the most part, and I agree with Justin. I think they're a great team. I think a great team and an elite team are a little bit different.
Okay. I've now been given my hierarchy of great versus elite. Okay, I got it. I just think it would be crazy to see an ACC champion that just defeated the #1 team in the country not get into the college football playoff at 12-1. But that's what we're looking at, especially when they're 14th at this point. And I know the committee says, hey, the rankings change week to week. We tear the house down. We rebuild each and every week, so the evaluation changes. And it's not necessarily a shuffling situation, but it's we tear it all down and we rebuild the top 25 each and every week, so teams can jump dramatically or drop dramatically. But as Brittany points out, the NC State win, okay win, but not something that's going to be substantial. They would need to have all sorts of chaos ensue elsewhere. All right, we ready to carve up these games?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so let's start with the Pitt game taking on Miami. So the Panthers come in here at 8-3. They could finish up in the ACC at 7-1. But after that North Carolina loss, off the radar, not able to win the division, hosting the Canes. So Brittany, let's start with you with Miami taking on Pitt.
Oh, I think that's kind of a tricky one because Miami has surprised us here a little bit lately. Brad Kai is an excellent quarterback. He's been outperforming Nathan Peterman, but I think that Pitt's run defense will keep Joe Yearby pretty contained, and I think that'll end up giving them a little bit of an edge. So Pitt in a close one.
Okay. Dan, BC Nation's got to be somewhat impressed with Pitt. It's a workmanlike team. They roll up their sleeves. They get the job done in the trenches. One of those kind of lunch pail teams taking on Miami.
Yeah, I think Pitt, if they win this game, I think they can go as high as the Russell Athletic Bowl or potentially get into that bowl, which would be the tier under the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, depending on where the champion were to end up with the tie-in, because the Orange Bowl is a playoff game this year. So I think they can finish as high as that bowl game, which is a great accomplishment for them. I think that there's too much riding on them in terms of bowl tie-ins, because if they lose, they could drop down to that Belk Bowl or even down into the Pinstripe. So I think for Pittsburgh, in order to get into that upper tier game that I think those fans and the team rightfully deserve with the way that they've played in league play. I mean, even though Miami's been a feel-good story after dismissal, I should say, of Al Golden, I still think Pittsburgh's going to take it.
Got an oddity for you three. Out of these 9 ACC-related games, this is the only game where the home team is the favorite. Pitt, a 6-point favorite. Justin taking on the Canes at 7-4.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pitt is the team in this one. Nate Peterman is doing what he needs to do. He's an efficient quarterback. He doesn't have to do a lot. Kadri Allison, whose name I probably just butchered, has been butchering defenses. He's just gone over 1,000 yards for the season, and Pittsburgh just grows running backs on trees. I don't know how they do it. It doesn't matter who they put out there, but they're talented and they just go crazy. Pittsburgh's going to do what they always do. They're going to play good defense. They're going to run the football, control the clock, and I think that they'll be better than Miami on Saturday.
Hey, Justin, if you do too well on the play on words, I'm not going to have you back because you're upstaging me. I don't like that.
I still like your intro. That was a lot of good alliteration.
I appreciate that, Justin. We'll stay with you. Let's talk a little Georgia Tech. So it was this time last year that the Yellow Jackets were finishing off the division, going to the ACC championship game, but it's all turned sour on Paul Johnson. 3-8, taking on a Georgia team that, after a early loss to Alabama, have kind of taken themselves off the radar, despite being at 8-3. So Georgia Tech, Justin.
And, you talk about Georgia, that's another team with an established head coach in Mark Richt, who may or may not be coaching for his job, which is hard to believe. But, you look at Georgia Tech, they just have so much youth. They've had so much inexperience, making uncharacteristic mistakes this season. Generally, they're a relatively disciplined team, and they just haven't had that this year. I don't really see a way that they can come in and upset the Bulldogs. It just strikes me as a very tall order, and I'd take Georgia by a couple of touchdowns.
So, Dan, in a season in which Georgia Tech pulled off one of the plays of the year, this is certainly not one of the teams of the year. Georgia Tech at 3-8, taking on the Bulldogs at 8-3.
I'm going to take Georgia Tech because Georgia's offensive coordinator used to coach for the New York Jets, and that's enough for me to not pick them. Just out of straight refusal to pick anything related to the New York Jets. Brian Schottenheimer's the offensive coordinator down there in Athens, but you know what? Hey, Georgia Tech, it's been a bad year for them. This game is their bowl game. It's a clean, old-fashioned hate game. It's at home in Atlanta. I know I picked them, Georgia Tech, that time to beat Florida State. They came through on my word. I'm going to go for it again. Why not? This is a team that has woefully underplayed expectations. And at home, senior day, hated rival, I got a good feeling about them. Plus, I'm not going to pick a guy for the Jets for them to win. I just can't do that.
Okay. Brittany, we hold grudges, and we hold them for a long, long time, don't we? Georgia Tech.
Well, that's what makes college football fun. I actually tweeted at the Georgia football program last weekend and told them, I used one of my mother's lines. I was like, I'm not angry at you right now. I'm just very disappointed in you. Hopefully they heard me. But I like Grayson Lambert against a Georgia Tech pass defense that has had a whole lot of trouble. I think that Georgia's going to be able to pull this one out this weekend.
There's got to be a backstory there. You were tweeting Georgia football fans.
So I'll probably get the chance to tell it again. I'm just kidding.
Okay, we'll leave that one go, and we'll move on from there. Brittany, we're going to serve up the Kentucky-Louisville game, so it's SEC ACC weekend. We see this with Florida State, Georgia Tech, South Carolina Clemson. I like the rivalry cross conferences, and this is one right here with Louisville at 6-5. Kentucky's got to win to get to postseason play.
Yeah, this one's a little bit painful. I don't know. Louisville has just been so messy lately. I'm leaning a little Kentucky. Don't hate me, ACC fans, but I'm leaning a little Kentucky on this one. I think they really want the bowl game, so I think they'll make it happen.
Dan, this is another road favorite. Louisville -4 at Kentucky.
I'm going to take Kentucky too because Louisville, they righted the ship and they've won enough games to get to a bowl game, but they did it against some bad competition. They did it against bad ACC teams. The ACC Atlantic is a rough division after you get past the top 2 teams, and the bottom 3 are just awful. So they come in Louisville, they clean up where they needed to against Boston College, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. They beat Virginia, but they lost to Pittsburgh. They haven't beaten anybody of note, and for whatever reason, Kentucky seems to be just doing fairly well outside of conference play. I know they haven't played that many good games, but they did beat Missouri. They did beat South Carolina, and I somewhat believe that the SEC right now is a little bit of a better conference, so I'm going to take the Wildcats to win that one.
Dan, you've got the SEC is a little bit better than the ACC.
Yeah,
I'm just checking.
Just a little bit. I know it's a tough draw, but the divisions when you look at that SEC West and I try to compare it opposite the ACC Coastal or the Atlantic, top to bottom, that SEC West is better than either division in the ACC right now.
All right. I'm taking my tongue out of my cheek now. Louisville at Kentucky. Justin, what you got for us?
You know, it's incredibly difficult to pick Louisville to win anything when they still don't have a starting quarterback. It's the end of the season, and they keep changing their minds. It's incredible to me. Kyle Bolin may start. Maybe it'll be Lamar Jackson. Maybe we'll let Reggie Bonifant throw a couple of passes. We just don't know. And there's just no consistency with Louisville this year. I'm going to make it a clean sweep and go with Kentucky in this one.
All right, Justin. As you well know, South Carolina dominated Clemson 6 consecutive years. It was at least 5 or 6 straight years. Clemson finally breaks through last year, and now the plights of the programs have completely flipped. South Carolina, top 10 team 2 consecutive years, 11 wins. Lose their coach, or he says, see ya, I'm off to play golf. And now they're sitting at 3-8 and facing the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, as I said earlier, Clemson is well earned their number 1 slot. South Carolina is just not a very good football team, and even last week I believe they lost to the Citadel. If I'm not, they either lost or they were really playing poorly, and well, they did both actually. Clemson, again, unless something outlandish happens, like they get lost on the way to the bus, I don't see them losing this game. I think they'll win by a lot, and I think they'll rub it in because it's their rival.
Okay. Dan, navigational skills for Clemson. Do they get on the bus and make it to the game?
Even if they didn't, they'd probably still win.
Brittany, Clemson and South Carolina, this would be one that we'd be looking forward to most years, but, man, it looks like a mismatch.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we talked earlier in the season about the debacle in Durham. I think this is going to be the catastrophe in Columbia. I don't really think they have any shot at being able to pull this off. I think Clemson's going to go in, get everything done. They know exactly what they have at stake. Dabo Swinney said earlier this week that he's making sure his team stays focused and kind of hones in on this rivalry game because they really do still need to win both games, as we kind of alluded to earlier in the show. So absolutely, I think Clemson will get this done and get it done well.
So let it be known if this Clemson-South Carolina game is worthy of a game title after the game, then, of course, Brittany has dibs on that. Brittany, we're going to stay with you with Virginia Tech taking on Virginia. Frank Beamer's swan song in the regular season. He's defeated the Cavaliers umpteen consecutive years, going to Charlottesville to take on Mike London in little less illustrious career and send off, but most likely Mike London's last game. as a coach at this particular school.
Yeah, and I think this one's pretty clear-cut as well. I would absolutely take Virginia Tech on this one. Do it for Beamer.
All right, what do you say there, Dan? Virginia Tech.
Yeah, if Virginia wins this game, then I'll dress up as a turkey. There's no way that's happening. I'm going with Virginia Tech. There's no way Virginia's winning that game.
So if Virginia wins the game, you've booked yourself on the show next week dressing as a turkey.
I will dress as a turkey.
I don't know really what that entails, but I sure want to see it. Be pulling hard for the Cavaliers. All right, Justin, what are you going to dress like if Virginia wins this game?
A very sad man. Frankly, as much as I want to see Dan dressed up as a turkey, I really don't think that that's going to happen. But this game will probably be close. It's been close the last couple of years because these programs are not very good right now. And I think it'll be a close game, but I think the Hokies will pull it out in the end.
Justin, the game we've been waiting for everyone here to break down is the Boston College-Syracuse game, of course. So Syracuse, 1 win in the ACC. Boston College, no wins in the ACC. How does this one finish up?
Well, I don't have a coin, actually, but that would be how I'd pick this one. I think Boston College, their defense is just going to have to win this game. That's how they win everything, that they do actually win, and I think the defense could score and outscore Syracuse's terrible, terrible offense. I think that's what will happen, and BC wins.
Brittany, we've got to give Dan the final word on this one, so we'll pitch it to you on BC and Syracuse.
Oh, yeah, we have to let him go last, especially if he's going to promise to wear more costumes. This is an interesting one. I agree with the coin flip analogy. You've got one really good defense, one really bad defense, an offense that gets some things done, and an offense that can't seem to get anything done. Syracuse is averaging 27.9 points per game right now, so I think if they can even score half of that against Boston College's defense, they will be able to pull this off. Sorry, Dan, if I'm wrong, I will wear a costume next week.
You're just going to wear a costume. That's all you're telling us.
To be determined.
Oh, to be determined. That's going out on a limb. All right, Dan, what do you say for your Eagles? Do they break into the win column in the conference?
I think they do, and I think they score a lot of points doing it. Why not, right? Because I have no idea reason why. Syracuse is a bad team. They're ranked over 100. I think they're in the 110 or something like that defensively. They're somewhere around 102 offensively. Boston College's offense has had its moments, especially running the ball. They did so somewhat successfully against Notre Dame. The passing offense is a mess. They're on their whatever we want to call it, quarterback, John Fadul, who was the walk-on freshman who started against Notre Dame. He's got a concussion. So we're back to Jeff Smith, who was QB2 at the beginning of the year. He got the starting job, had a concussion. This is the life of a Boston College football fan. You're on your 5th quarterback, who is your 2nd quarterback to start the season. I think Smith can score some points. I think he's athletic enough, and I think even though BC's offense was ranked 127th out of 128, the defense is ranked number 1. I just think they're going to do it. I think they're going to score 24 points against Syracuse because Syracuse is a disaster. And Boston College, while a complete disaster offensively, is not a disaster defensively. And that defense is going to set up the offense that not even they can screw it up.
If they can kick field goals, then maybe they win.
Kicked the 43-yarder against Notre Dame, and that was the first time I think we'd seen a 40-plus yard field goal that wasn't in doubt in I think 2 years. So that was a good positive. Mark, I know I mentioned it to you earlier. I'm going to pitch this to everyone else. I can't think of another time when there has been an offense and a defense that has ranked number 1 in total defense and dead last in total offense. We could be heading there.
It's historic ground for Boston College to break here, concluding the season against Syracuse. We'll all be watching the bottom line for the score updates throughout the afternoon. All right, Brittany, we've got another barn burner in Duke and Wake Forest.
Yeah. I like Duke in that one just because I think that their offense gives them a little bit of an advantage. They've been able to outperform anything that Wake's been able to do. It's really been a hard year for Wake. So, Duke.
All right, Dan, the Duke trajectory has been sliding down the hill since that horrible play against Miami. They're down to 6-5. Duke at Wake.
Yeah, and the only good thing for Duke is that I'm fairly certain Wake's trajectory started where they're heading. So that still keeps Duke a little bit further above Wake. I'm going to take Duke.
Which I'd actually have to look up if there is such a thing as a negative trajectory. I don't know. Justin, help us out. Wake and Duke.
I can't help any of you or these two teams. They are struggling right now, and again, it's just incredible how badly Duke is cratered. But I think they'll crawl out of the crater this week and sneak past Wake.
All right, folks. Let's embrace the two games that matter. Here we go, Brittany. We got North Carolina and North Carolina State. Of course, the Tar Heels have already secured a spot in the ACC championship game, but if they've got that slither of hope to not only capture the ACC but a college football playoff berth, of course, they've got to beat their arch rival NC State.
Yeah, and I think the Tar Heels know that. I think they know that if they're going to even be able to present an argument, they've got to win this game soundly and the next game soundly. So I personally think they're so excited about the season and how well it's gone that they're going to show up and really, really perform on Saturday. So UNC, but I think that they're gonna win big.
5.5-point favorite. North Carolina goes to NC State. Dan, the Wolfpack, not much on defense, but Jacoby Brissett and company can put up some points.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be pretty high scoring, and I think North Carolina State will cover. I know it's a 6-point spread in favor of North Carolina. I think they'll cover. I think it'll be closer than or less than a touchdown difference. But I agree with Brittany. North Carolina's got too much at stake for this game, and they've got too much that they can finally believe in. Off of the performances of the last couple of years, or the last year, especially defensively last year, there's just too much for them right now that they need to believe and buy into. So I think they're going to win, but I think NC State's going to make it a game.
Okay, Justin, dare I ask, North Carolina's a great team.
I'm gonna hear about that for a while, aren't I? If NC State could run the ball effectively, that might be a way to beat Carolina, because their run defense hasn't been very good, but they're so good against the pass, and that's NC State's strength. I don't see it working out for the Wolfpack. I think Carolina will win this one.
All right, here we finally have a game that I want to see. I can't guarantee that I'm going to see it because there's too many games to see on Saturday, but it's a game I would like to see, Justin. Florida State, two very defensive-minded teams that are very challenged offensively, and a Florida team that, despite dropping to 12th in the rankings, in the college football rankings, still with one loss in the SEC, and Florida State and Alabama in front of them have a shot at the college football playoff. Florida State waved that goodbye a few weeks ago, but still very, very formidable.
Yeah, and it's fun that these teams are both highly ranked again. It feels like, the classic rivalry game here. It's tough, now that the Everett Golson experiment has finally been put to rest. I think Florida State has settled down a little bit. And on offense, I think if Davin Cook is actually healthy, which has been a bit of a challenge for him the last couple of weeks, if he's healthy, I don't see any way that they can stumble here. I think that they'll win, and it'll be close, but I think Florida State can win.
Dan, this Florida team looked very strong early on with wins against Tennessee and Georgia. In recent weeks, they have scuffled by the likes of Vandy 9-7 and Florida Atlantic in overtime last week. So the Gators remain with the one loss, but they're not impressing anyone of late, and now they're a home underdog against Florida State.
I think like the North Carolina game, I think this one's going to be close, but I really do think Florida has a very good chance to win this game. When I looked at this game, and I was kind of doing when I was doing my homework on it, I was looking it through. Football Study Hall, which is a great website for kind of the stat breakdowns and numbers game, said that Florida would win 26-25, or officially in their numbers game 26.4-25. So it's split right down the middle. I mean, it doesn't get any more even than that. But when I was looking at this game, the one thing about Florida is that they can still make the tournament. They can still make the college football playoff as long as they win this game and then go to the SEC championship, and more than likely will play Alabama. If they beat Alabama, and again, you get a little bit of chaos up at the top, Florida could jump the rankings just as quickly as they fell. I think that's a message that's loud and clear to them. I think Florida State can do a very good job of playing spoiler as long as they keep this game as long as they make Florida look bad and keep this game kind of in their favor. But I think Florida's going to win it, and I think Florida's going to win, be up convincingly, and have a big lead. Have Florida State come charging back, and then hold on for the win. And then you go into the SEC championship game for the Gators, and if they can win that, they're right back in the playoff picture. I think the last 2 weeks the committee dropped them down. Like you said, they break it down and build it right back up, or tear it down and build it right back up. And this is a big game for them. I think they're going to pull it out, Florida.
Dan not only picks the game, he describes how the game's going to play out in the dramatic conclusion. All right, what I think the issue for Florida is, Dan, is not what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to perceive their performance once they beat Florida State and Alabama. As a 12-1 SEC champion, I think they're good to go. The issue is actually going to be beating Florida State and Alabama for Florida. It's not going to be the perception after they get it done. So, Brittany, I know that you've seen this contest play out a few times, so your thoughts on this year's edition of Florida State?
Well, I think it's definitely an interesting one. Florida State is 2-2 away. They've only got 2 losses, and both of those were away. Florida has been bitten by the injury bug pretty bad at this point in the season. And Treon Harris has started to play more poorly. They've won their last 4 games, but he's thrown 7 interceptions over the last 4 games. Florida State obviously has kind of struggled to find an offensive identity as they switch between quarterbacks. That always kind of makes you wobble a little bit. They are looking better now behind Sean McGuire. I think Florida State can win this one, but I think it's going to be a close one. I think it's going to be a nail-biter.
Okay, so 1 week from today, unlike the other conferences, we know that we're looking at Clemson and North Carolina for a preview for the ACC championship game on our little ACC breakdown, but we're not going to know until the games are played on Saturday as to the ramifications on the college football playoffs, especially for that great North Carolina team. All right. My thanks to Justin Cates from Inside the ACC, also Dan Rubin from BC Interruption, and, of course, Brittany Taylor-Newman, who has held off her cooking skills just for a few minutes to talk some football with us and join ACC Breakdown again. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy holidays, guys.